There's a tension people feel but don't always name. It shows up in conversations between Africans and African Americans, in the pauses, in the misunderstandings, in the way the same sentence can land as neutral to one person and feel sharp to another. And usually, when that tension shows up, we rush to explain it with words like culture, or values, or education, or even character. But what if that explanation is wrong? What if the difference isn't what we value, but how our bodies learn to survive? Because here's the thing, no one ever says out loud. Stress does not feel the same to everyone, and it doesn't live in the body the same way either. This video is not about who is right. It's not about who suffered more. And it's definitely not about who should change. This is about something quieter, something older, something biological. Because different histories don't just shape stories. They shape stress responses, and stress responses shape how we listen, how we interpret tone, how quickly we trust, and how fast our bodies move into defense. Let me say this clearly before we go any further. Different stress responses do not mean different values. They do not mean different intelligence. They do not mean one group is more evolved, more healed, or more aware. They mean something very specific happened to the body over time, and the body adapted. So many of our arguments are not actually arguments. They are misfires. One nervous system asking, "Why are you so intense?" Another asking, "Why don't you see the danger?" Neither one wrong, neither one imagining things. Just two bodies trained by different timelines. And this is where people usually push back. They say, but stress is stress, but hardship is hardship, but everybody went through something. Yes, and also no, because stress isn't only about what happened. It's about how long it lasted, whether it ended, whether the body ever got to stand down, whether safety ever returned.
Okay, let me slow this down, because this is where people start squinting. Are you saying Africans weren't stressed? Because that's not true. And are you saying African Americans are just permanently stressed? Because that sounds kind of insulting if we're not careful. So what exactly are we talking about here?
That's the right question. And no, this is not about who experienced stress and who didn't. Every human culture has faced stress. What's different is the pattern. Think of stress like an alarm system. Some alarms are loud, sudden, and temporary. They go off and then they shut off. Other alarms never fully turn off. They hum in the background. They stay alert even when the room looks quiet. Both systems are trying to protect you. But they do very different things to the body over time. For many African cultures, stress historically came in waves: war, famine, colonization, displacement, intense, real, devastating, but often followed by something critical: an end, a return, a rebuilding, a community that stayed intact enough to regulate together. For African Americans, stress followed a different rule. It was not just danger. It was danger without an off switch. And when a nervous system never gets confirmation that the threat is over, it doesn't relax. It adapts.
From a biological perspective, this distinction matters. The human nervous system evolved to survive short-term threats. It did not evolve to remain activated across generations. When stress becomes continuous, the body does not ask why. It simply rewrites its baseline. This does not produce weakness. It produces efficiency, hyper-awareness, rapid threat detection, heightened sensitivity to tone, context, and power dynamics. These are survival adaptations, but when misunderstood, they are often mislabeled as aggression, overreaction, mistrust, emotionality. Labels applied without understanding the biology beneath them.
So when Africans and African Americans talk past each other, it's often not because one group doesn't care. It's because one nervous system is asking, "Is this safe?" And the other is asking, "Why are you still bracing?" Same people, different stress. And until we understand that, we keep arguing about culture when the real conversation is happening inside the body. So now the question becomes obvious. If stress shaped the nervous system differently, what exactly is stress doing inside the body? That's where we're going next. Let's talk about stress the way the body understands it, not as an emotion, not as a personality trait, but as a biological event. Stress begins in one place only, the nervous system. Not your thoughts, not your beliefs, your body's alarm system. When the body detects a threat, real or perceived, it does three things immediately. It speeds the heart, it sharpens attention, and it reroutes energy away from long-term functions toward survival. This is not pathology. This is design. But here's the part we almost never talk about. The body does not measure stress by how dramatic the event is. It measures stress by duration.
Okay, so you're saying a short, intense stress doesn't do the same thing as a quieter stress that never ends? Because that feels backwards to a lot of people.
Exactly. Think of it like this. A fire alarm that goes off once is startling, but a fire alarm that hums quietly every day changes how you live in the building. You stop sleeping deeply. You stay half alert. You don't fully unpack your bags. The body behaves the same way. This is where the difference between episodic stress and chronic stress matters. Episodic stress comes in bursts. The threat appears, the body mobilizes, the threat ends, the body returns to baseline. Chronic stress never gives the body confirmation that the danger is over, so the baseline moves. Now let's anchor this historically, without comparison, without hierarchy. For many African societies, stress was often episodic. Severe, yes. Disruptive, yes. But often followed by periods of relative stability where the nervous system could downshift. Community rituals, collective meaning-making, reintegration after threat. These weren't just cultural practices. They were regulation mechanisms.
From a physiological standpoint, recovery is as important as survival. Stress hormones are meant to rise temporarily. They are also meant to fall. When recovery is built into social structure, the nervous system learns a predictable rhythm: activation, then rest. This rhythm preserves long-term health.
For African Americans, the pattern was different. Stress was not only physical danger, it was persistent uncertainty. Am I safe today? Am I seen today? Am I protected by the law today? Does my success make me visible or vulnerable today? And most importantly, when does this end? When the body cannot answer that question, it stops waiting. It adapts.
So this is why people talk past each other. One body is saying, "The threat is gone. Why are you still tense?" And the other is saying, "Because last time I relaxed, something happened."
This is not a psychological flaw. It is a biological memory. The nervous system does not forget patterns that ensured survival. It only releases them when safety becomes consistent.
So when stress shows up differently, it is not because one group is more anxious, or more aggressive, or more emotional. It is because one system learned that danger ends, and the other learned that danger shifts forms. Both learned correctly. And here's where this gets even more interesting, because chronic stress doesn't just change reactions, it changes how the body uses energy, which means it changes health, aging, inflammation, attention, sleep. And that brings us to the next layer. What does chronic stress actually do inside the body over time? So far, we've talked about stress as a pattern. Now, we're going to talk about what that pattern does, because stress doesn't stay abstract. It moves, it settles, it changes the body's internal climate. When stress becomes chronic, the body begins to operate in what scientists call a high alert state. Hormones meant for emergencies stay elevated longer than they should, not dramatically, not explosively, quietly, day after day. This is where people misunderstand what stress actually does. They think stress only affects mood, but stress is chemical instruction. It tells the body where to send energy, what to suppress, what can wait.
From a biological standpoint, chronic stress shifts the body into a long-term prioritization of survival. Functions not immediately necessary for survival are reduced. This includes immune regulation, tissue repair, digestion, deep sleep. The body is not malfunctioning, it is reallocating resources.
This is why chronic stress often shows up as inflammation that doesn't seem to have a clear cause, exhaustion that sleep doesn't fully fix, tension held deep in the body, heightened sensitivity to noise, tone, or environment. Not because the body is fragile, but because it's busy. A body trained to survive does not invest heavily in rest.
So this explains something people feel but can't explain. Why they're tired even when nothing happened. Why their body feels on edge even during good times. It's not the moment, it's the accumulation.
Yes, stress accumulates when it has nowhere to discharge, and over time, the body stops expecting relief. It stops asking, when will this be over? And starts organizing life around vigilance. Now we reach the question people are often afraid to ask. If stress changes the body this deeply, can those changes be passed down? Not as memories, not as stories, but as preparedness.
The body communicates across generations through biological signaling. This does not transmit specific events. It transmits sensitivities, thresholds, baseline expectations. Offspring may inherit a nervous system calibrated for faster threat detection, stronger stress responses, slower return to baseline. This is not destiny, it is a starting setting.
This is not about being stuck, and it is not about trauma being some permanent stain. The body adapts because adaptation works. But what works for survival does not always work for peace. And here's the part people miss. These adaptations created strength, speed, perception, endurance, creativity under pressure. But strength used too long without rest becomes strain.
So when people say, why can't you just relax? They're asking a body to do something it was never trained to trust.
Regulation is not a decision. It is a learned physiological state. And learning requires safety that is repeated, not promised.
So if stress patterns look inherited, it's not because pain was passed down. It's because preparedness was, and preparedness is intelligent. But here's where this turns toward healing. Because once we understand what stress has been doing, we can finally talk about how to release it, not culturally, not politically, biologically and spiritually. That's where we go next. So far, we've talked about stress as chemistry, but chemistry never exists in a vacuum. It exists inside context, inside rhythm, inside meaning, inside community. And this is where culture enters the body. For many African societies, culture was not decoration. It was structure. It told the nervous system when to move, when to rest, when grief belonged to the group, when joy needed witnesses. Culture created predictability. And predictability is one of the strongest signals of safety the body knows.
From a regulatory perspective, ritual functions as timing. Repeated patterns inform the nervous system what to expect. When expectation is reliable, baseline stress decreases. This is not belief-based, it is pattern-based.
Drumming, song, dance, call and response, ancestor acknowledgement. These were not extras. They were regulation tools. They discharged stress through the body. They synchronized heart rates. They reminded the nervous system, you are not alone in this. When stress was shared, it did not have to burrow. Now we have to name what changed, because for African Americans, culture was not allowed to function normally. It was fragmented, disrupted, punished, policed, not just belief systems, but regulation systems.
So it wasn't just people being taken. It was timing being broken, rhythm being interrupted, the nervous system losing its anchors.
Yes, and when rhythm disappears, the nervous system improvises. It finds regulation wherever it can. Hypervigilance, control, perfectionism, spiritual suppression, constant productivity. Not because people forgot culture, but because survival demanded substitutes.
When external regulation is removed, internal regulation intensifies. This increases self-monitoring and self-control. While effective short-term, it elevates long-term stress load.
Here's the distinction most people never hear. African spirituality historically distributed stress. African American survival often internalized it. Both were adaptive, but they affect the body differently. When meaning is shared, stress is buffered. When meaning is questioned, stress sharpens.
So when Africans say, "Why do you carry it like that?" and African Americans say, "Because I have to," they're both telling the truth.
Meaning reduces biological cost. Isolation increases it. Neither is a moral condition. Both are physiological outcomes.
Culture didn't disappear. It went underground, into music, into humor, into faith, into movement, into language, into the body itself. But the body has been carrying too much alone for too long. And that brings us to the final realization. What happens when we stop mislabeling stress and start understanding it? So here's the truth we almost never let ourselves say. You were never broken. Your body was not failing you. It was protecting you. Every reaction we've talked about, every tension, every moment of vigilance, it came from a body that learned very early one rule: stay ready. The problem was never adaptation. The problem was duration, because systems built for survival were never meant to stay online forever. And when we forget that, we start turning biology into judgment. We say things like too sensitive, too guarded, too intense, too emotional. When what we're really seeing is a nervous system that learned faster, scanned deeper, and stayed alert longer.
So this changes how we talk to each other. Because instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" we start asking, "What trained you this way?"
When understanding replaces judgment, regulation becomes possible. The nervous system responds to accuracy. Being correctly understood reduces threat signals.
This is where unity actually lives, not in pretending we carry stress the same way, not in minimizing difference, but in recognizing why the difference exists. Different histories shaped different stress responses, not different values, not different worth. When Africans look at African Americans and see tension, they are often seeing a body trained under constant uncertainty. When African Americans look at Africans and see calm, they are often seeing a nervous system that was allowed to discharge stress collectively. Neither is superior, both are intelligent, but healing begins when we stop confusing adaptation with identity.
So the divide wasn't cultural misunderstanding. It was nervous systems speaking different languages.
And the beautiful thing about the nervous system is that it can learn new patterns, not through pressure, not through shame, but through safety, repeated, consistent, real. So now we've answered the why, but there's one question left. What exactly is stress doing inside the body, moment to moment? How does it affect inflammation, sleep, aging, healing? That's where we go next. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can finally stop blaming yourself for the adaptation. You were never broken. You were brilliant in conditions that never gave you rest. And now we learn how to let the body stand down.